world's most feared prison. The gates slam shut with sound that echoes across the frozen lake, a metallic thud that means only one thing: no one leaves. This is Fire Island, a remote fortress deep in northern Russia. Locals call it the Island of the Damned. Guards call it the end of the world. For the 200 men locked inside, it's something far worse, a life without an ending. For centuries, this island stood as a quiet monastery. Now it's a maximum security prison, home to the country's most dangerous criminals. Killers, mob leaders, and men once feared across continents. Here, life imprisonment truly means life. No inmate has ever left alive. The walls are ancient, carved from stone between 80 and 150 centimeters thick. Even the most determined prisoner couldn't chip through them without being caught. Beyond the walls lie icy marshes and the cold black water of Lake Novozero, a natural barrier no man has ever crossed. Temperatures swing violently here. Scorching summers that reach 35 degrees Celsius and brutal winters that drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The guards say even the air seems to freeze time. Inside these walls, days blur together, a punishment that never ends. The prison still carries traces of its past. The old church dome looms above the cell blocks, its ancient frescoes faded by smoke and age. What once echoed with prayer now rings with the sound of chains and iron doors. Each morning begins with roll call. Rows of men stand silently, wrists cuffed behind their backs. The guards search every pocket, every fold of clothing, for anything forbidden: metal, glass, or sharpened plastic. Inside each cell, every object is bolted down: beds, tables, even toilets. So nothing can be turned into a weapon or a tool for escape. In the control room, hundreds of cameras watch every corner. Even the smallest movements are recorded. Through intercoms, the guard can speak to any inmate without ever stepping inside. It's not just punishment, it's total isolation. Among the inmates is Yuri Levinov, a man who once believed he could outsmart the law. Now he's serving a life sentence for murder. One of the many men who thought he'd never be caught. When the guards open his door, he stands with his back to the wall, eyes empty, hands ready for the cuffs. He says quietly, "Sometimes I prefer the firing squad." There's no death penalty here anymore. Only time, endless and heavy. For most prisoners, the island has become a slow execution by silence. But beneath the stillness of Fire Island, something darker lingers. Because not all the inmates have accepted their fate, and some, believe it or not, are still trying to find a way out. The locals say time stands still on Fire Island, but for the guards who patrol its walls, time never stops watching back. At sunrise, the frozen mist rolls across Lake Novozero, wrapping the ancient monastery-turned-prison in a ghostly haze. The structure dates back to the 16th century, built by Orthodox monks who once called this sacred ground home. Back then, its flickering torches could be seen from miles away, earning it the name the Island of Fire. Centuries later, when the monks were forced out during the Russian Revolution, the place took on a new purpose. The quiet halls that once echoed with prayers became cells for the condemned, a gulag for those labeled enemies of the state. Then in 1994, the monastery's final transformation began. The government sealed the island, turning it into one of Russia's highest security prisons, a place designed not to punish, but to erase. From that point forward, it was known simply as IK5, Fire Island. The deputy governor, Igor Dashkovsky, has walked these corridors for over a decade. He knows every wall, every sound the building makes at night. It's a fortress, he says. Even if someone broke free from the cell, they'd drown before they reached the shore. Each day, guards perform multiple patrols, checking for cracks in the old monastery walls and testing the electric fences that surround the facility. The isolation is so absolute that even radio signals fade before reaching the main gate. Inside, the air is heavy with damp stone and disinfectant. Wing 4, the most recently renovated block, was once the Church of the Resurrection of Christ. Its ancient frescoes, saints and angels painted long before any of the inmates were born, now stare down at steel bars and armored doors. The paradox is chilling. Divine art above, life sentences below. Each cell holds 3 or 4 men. The only private space is a small toilet in the corner, bolted tightly to the floor. The lights never go off completely. Guards must always be able to see inside. Every week, prisoners are allowed 2 showers. The hot water comes from old boilers that rumble like distant thunder. Cameras are not permitted in the shower area, one of the few places where the inmates have even a fragment of privacy. For medical care, there's a small wing run by Dr. Victor Sigovich. Here, infections are treated, teeth pulled, and wounds stitched, all under the same flickering fluorescent light. Once a month, a full-time doctor arrives on the mainland by boat, escorted by armed officers. But beyond medical visits, Fire Island runs entirely on its own. There's a bakery that supplies bread for the inmates and guards alike. There's a small sewing workshop built over an old monk's graveyard, where prisoners now stitch uniforms, life jackets, and gloves from Moscow companies. During construction, workers discovered a gravestone dated 1858, a reminder that even in death, this island holds its prisoners close. Over the years, something unexpected has happened here. Some of the inmates, men once branded monsters, have turned to religion. One prisoner, known simply as Mikhail, says faith is all that keeps him alive. He found it after his death sentence was converted to life imprisonment when Russia abolished executions in 1996. On his back is a tattoo of himself kneeling before God, a plea for forgiveness inked in black. When they stopped executing us, he says, they gave us life instead, but life here feels like death spread over years. Every morning, when the bells of the old monastery ring, the sound travels across the cold lake, not as a call to prayer anymore, but as a warning, a reminder that this is a place where time, faith, and punishment are all the same thing. And yet, despite its isolation, Fire Island is alive, watching, waiting, testing every man's will to endure. Because even here, among those who have lost everything, hope is the most dangerous thing of all. Mornings on Fire Island begin in silence. No alarms, no chatter, only the sound of boots echoing on stone floors and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. By 7 a.m., the guards conduct their first inspection. Every wall, fence, and gate is checked, every lock tested twice. Then the doors open one by one, revealing lines of prisoners already standing at attention. Their hands go behind their backs before a single word is spoken. It's not discipline. It's survival. Among them are 189 men, each serving life sentences. Murderers, gang leaders, terrorists, every kind of crime that earned the state's harshest punishment. They move in silence, knowing that any sudden gesture could bring the guards running. Even inside the cell blocks, every object is bolted down. Beds, tables, chairs, even mirrors welded to the floor and walls. The reason is simple. In this place, anything can become a weapon. Meals are brought directly to the cells, 3 times a day. There's no dining hall. It would be too dangerous to gather the inmates in one place. Guards pass metal trays through narrow slots, watching every move through reinforced glass. The only time they leave their cells is for 2 hours of exercise each day, and even that happens in small, rustic cages outside. In winter, icy winds sweep off the lake. In summer, the air fills with swarms of mosquitoes. Some men choose to stay inside rather than face the elements. But not everyone accepts the routine. Some try to hold on to their minds and their humanity by working. Inside the old monastery yard stands a sewing workshop, a rare privilege for prisoners with clean records. Here, they make life jackets, uniforms, and gloves for private companies on the mainland. The best workers earn about 100 euros a month, money they can use to buy food from the prison shop or send to their families. Others use it to pay compensation to victims' relatives, a legal requirement in Russia. One inmate says he sends up to 3,000 rubles every month to the mother of his victim. It's a small act of repentance, but in a place where most men are forgotten, it gives him something to hold on to. The psychologists who work here say the hardest battle isn't against violence, it's against hopelessness. After years of isolation, even the strongest minds begin to fade. The men stop talking. Some stop dreaming. A few start writing letters, long confessions, or endless complaint about food and conditions. Anything just to remind the world they still exist. Guards say they receive dozens of letters every week. Most are never answered. There's a saying on Fire Island: you don't serve a sentence here, you live it. Each day blends into the next until time itself loses meaning. For the guards, the monotony is just as heavy. They spend decades in the same corridors, watching the same faces behind bars. If you look into their eyes too long, says one officer, you start to lose something of yourself too. Inmates are watched constantly through surveillance cameras, except in two places: the showers and the tiny chapel. The chapel, once part of the monastery, is where some come to pray, not for freedom, but for forgiveness. The faint smell of candle wax mixes with cold stone. It's the only place on the island that still feels alive. One prisoner says quietly, "Faith is all that's left. Hope is too dangerous here." Still, others cling to that very danger. Every so often, guards hear whispers of tunnels, of plans of escape. None have ever succeeded. Between the island and the shore are endless marshlands, cold, empty, and impossible to cross. And yet, every man here dreams of that moment, the impossible night when the island finally lets someone go. Because even on Fire Island, surrounded by walls older than memory, no one ever stops imagining freedom. Night falls early on Fire Island. The lake freezes into stillness, and the only sound of the wind and the faint hum of the prison's generators. The world outside moves on. But here, time has long stopped. For the men locked inside these stone walls, life imprisonment is exactly what it sounds like, a life measured in days that never change. In Russia, the law says they may apply for release after 25 years of good behavior. But in the prison's entire history, not a single man has ever been set free. Even the guards call a life that ends in slow motion. Lieutenant Colonel Igor Dashkovsky, the deputy governor, explains it simply. Our walls are thick, our fence is high, but the real prison is inside their minds. They know they will die here. The guard perform their final inspection rounds at midnight, flashlights sweeping across frost-covered walls. They're not just watching for escape attempts. They're watching for despair. On Fire Island, hopelessness can be as dangerous as violence. Inside the cells, the prisoners prepare for another sleepless night. The lights dim, but never go out. For some, faith fills the silence. For others, regret does. Mikhail Bukharov, a man who once faced execution, now prays every evening under a small wooden cross. "They spared my life," he whispers, "but they took everything else." He once said he'd rather face a firing squad than spend the rest of his days here, a sentiment shared by many who've been here longer than a generation. Others still hold on to a fragile kind of hope. Yuri Levinov, one of the youngest lifers, believes he can change, that someday a psychologist or parole board might see him as more than the crime he committed. "Not everyone here wants to die," he says. "Some of us still want to live." But the psychologists who evaluate these men know the odds. They study every letter, every confession, every moment of behavior, deciding who is safe to trust and who will never see daylight again. Most are too far gone. One expert admits quietly, "You can't rebuild a life that was built on destruction." Even family visits are rare. After 10 years, well-behaved inmates are allowed one short reunion each year, held in small, furnished apartments built within the old monastery. The visits last 3 days under constant surveillance. Children play quietly while guards watch from behind reinforced glass. The prison's strict screening means almost no incidents occur. Yet even in those rooms, where warmth briefly returns, there's a sense of distance no human touch can close. Many families never visit at all. Some don't even write. Outside, the guards live simple lives on the neighboring Sweet Island, in wooden huts left from the Soviet days. Their own children grow up playing within sight of the same walls that keep the lifers trapped forever. For them, the boundary between duty and compassion blurs every day. One officer puts it bluntly, "As a man, I believe some of them deserve death. But as a guard, I must keep them alive." That's the rule. By dawn, the island begins another cycle. The bells ring again over Lake Novozero, a haunting echo across the frozen water. To the outside world, Fire Island is just another dot on the map. But to those within, it's a world unto itself, where faith and guilt, punishment and repentance coexist under the same roof. No one has ever escaped. No one has ever been released. Every stone, every cell, every echo of footsteps carries the same truth. On Fire Island, a life sentence means forever.